So without any further ado, I'm going to go ahead and hand over to our presenter today, Michael Ray, who's our Director of Customer Success Strategy here at Topia. Michael.
Hey, thank you, Sean, and welcome everyone. Good morning and good afternoon for those of you on the East Coast. I am really excited to be here to talk with everyone about this topic. So just a quick preview. Today we're going to look at some context around the overall um, around the overall HR tech and mobility tech landscape, and we're going to spend a little time talking about how to evaluate technology. I'm going to cover some elements of business planning, and then we'll finish with a quick dip into a review of tools and how to evaluate specific tech solutions. Finally, I'll cover some very high-level elements of effective management of technology. And my sincere goal this morning is really to provide each of you some interesting and useful information and perspective, and I look forward to your feedback on whether we've met that goal this morning. So to kick things off, Sean put together this first slide, and I think it's a really great slide because it kind of highlights a challenge that we have today. We are just so inundated with technology, and this represents just some of the landscape for HR tech, just some of the logos or solutions that are out there and available. And as you can see, it's a total alphabet soup. Some of these might be solutions you have or may work with, and I venture to say we come up with a dozen or maybe 100 more. We're literally swamped with tech solutions and tech options in our day-to-day work, and so trying to navigate in this landscape, especially to try to make good decisions about what is the right path for your organization or business, is very challenging. And when it comes to mobility-specific tech, there's also no shortage. The mobility arena is just as complex. We have hundreds of service providers supporting all aspects of mobility, from planning to logistics, compensation through compliance, and it seems that every product is leading with some kind of technology today. So it's really important to have an effective framework for making decisions about technology. And this framework really starts with building a business case through implementation all the way through the effective management of technology. So the choices we have to face are not just about service providers, but about the technology solutions our businesses are going to rely on, are really myriad. And the solutions are diverse. We have point solutions, platforms, apps, and tools, all doing various things of greater or lesser value. And sometimes it's a service delivered or better enabled via technology, and sometimes the technology or service is the service or product. And it seems technology solutions pop up every day for nearly every mobility area of focus, including employee onboarding, immigration, relocation, logistics, and almost every aspect of the relationship with the employee. And what this means for us is that understanding this HR tech environment and being able to match organizational needs to solutions has become a core skill for those of us in HR. It's really no longer nice to have, but a must have for folks in roles traditionally very separate from pure technology. I speak with so many HR practitioners and senior leaders in mobility, both on the corporate side and on the service provider side, who wish they had a much better understanding or foundation in technology, and a feel that their job really would be better enabled with better technology skills. So, but I do want to say it's not necessary to become an engineer to be very effective in managing tech, and especially for our topic this morning around selecting tech, what's critical is understanding the various types of technologies, being able to define the benefits for them, and then the most important aspect of this of all is really, and very unique to you, is understanding your own organization's needs and being able to match those needs to the options or solutions. So we have to make the right decisions about where we invest our budgets and, most importantly, our time to focus on the specific challenges that your organizations are facing. So wow, I look at this picture here. The visuals Sean chose for the slide really takes me back, and I hope that I'm not the only one on this call who remembers computers that look like this. When I first came into this industry back in the late 1990s, I managed the global operations for what was then GMAC Global Relocation. We thought we had what was then a pretty great system for making and tracking payments on a global basis. And in some respects, we really did, but that system literally necessitated emailing our entire database around the globe. Europe would work on the database during the day, and then at the end of the day, that team would email the database to us in California. We'd enter payments, and at the end of our day, we would send that off to Asia for their workday. The cycle would repeat. And of course, on days when something went wrong, it would throw the whole system off track and create all kinds of nightmare problems. So, excuse me, today with everything in the cloud, it's really completely incomprehensible that any business would operate that way. And thankfully, we don't have to. During that same period, during the 90s and early 2000s, some of us will recall much of the focus of technology was really about building workflow around mobility and relocation services. And it was sponsored by the big mobility companies at the time, including Cendant, GMEC, Prudential Relocation. But that's left us with a legacy of global mobility tech that it's really only now beginning to fade. And the legacy of this is that in our industry, we are still buying technology like it's 1999. And let me explain. The relocation companies billed for their services on a transactional basis, still do. In other words, the cost of technology had to be bundled up into the cost of a transfer or relocation, and therefore billed back to the business unit as part of a transaction. A relocation or transfer for which the business was paying, right? So there was and often still is no budget or line item for technology. So companies across our industry had to figure out ways to make the fees for this technology transactional. What's really important about this is that tech investment really focused on things like workflow efficiencies or efficiencies in data management that ultimately reduced transaction cost. So to some degree, we're still buying tech like it's 1999, and that's limiting to some types of transformational technology that's available today. Anything that's not easily bundled into a transaction or doesn't demonstrate some sort of cost reduction or transactional efficiency is difficult for us. We have to take extra steps to get that sold internally. I'll talk more about this in a moment, but just note that there's all kinds of transformational technology, and efficiencies are really only one part of that. So what is transformational technology? Just as there's technology in place today that is really fundamentally changing the way we live, there is also technology in place and being developed that is fundamentally changing how broad areas of relocation and mobility work. These technologies are really redefining limits of what is possible in our industry. What I'm going to do next is highlight just a few of these technologies and that I find are truly transformational. These companies are just a small representative sample of some of the tools and capabilities in the market today. By the way, I want everybody to know I'm not getting any sort of endorsement or referral for this. Let's start with a startup company called PricePoint, which is transforming how companies price and manage household goods. For those of you who don't know the company, Ben Heller is CEO, and the company is doing something completely amazing in the household goods shipping space. PricePoint uses technology to completely automate household goods shipping, pricing, and establish complete transparency between the sender, the mobility company, the customer, and the transferring employee. Not only does this simplify the process, but allows for virtually immediate turnaround on quotes and selection of the supplier. If you've been in the industry any period of time at all, you know that household goods pricing and all those legacy tariffs and ways of pricing are incredibly complex and opaque to everyone. This is a bad thing for everyone because basically the free market is broken and it leads to all sorts of mistrust and inefficiencies. But Ben and his team are innovating to really lower transaction costs, improve the market, create transparency, and virtually eliminate the need for audits, which is another big savings. And so continuing with the household goods theme, Yembo is a startup joining Shift and a couple of other tech companies in completely transforming how a survey in CubeSheet is done and how an inventory is developed. And the big thing for Yembo is that they are employing artificial intelligence and machine learning to make the survey process better all the time. Video services are really well-established tech. They're so last decade or 2000 teens, but the integration of AI into this process is ready to completely transform this market. I'd like to mention another company in our industry that's very well known and well established, NetXpat. Alan and Natalie and their team, perhaps some of you have worked with them, have harnessed technology in how they deliver their assessment, cultural training, and spousal support services. But what I think is truly innovative and completely transformational is that they've also harnessed the power of digital communities to create a social community geared towards facilitating the adjustment, job search, and a range of mobility related concerns for the spouse. And it's truly powerful, and I think only the start of what's possible using digital communities. I don't want to make this a Topia infomercial, but our own Teleport has done something similar with digital community and has used crowdsourcing of information to create an amazing resource to help people in choosing and understanding their destinations. Sten and his team, and Sten now leads our product and engineering function, did something truly amazing with their startup that's now part of Topia. If you've not seen the tools, I encourage you to take a look, and a number of the tools are completely free. But crowdsourcing of information remains a wide open source of future innovation. Finally, DwellWorks, another well-established company, is remarkable to technology and innovation. Is this company. One thing that the team there has done is to recognize that home finding and settling in process was really ripe for technology-enabled innovation. So today, through their firm, it's possible to engage in this process through a portal in a completely digital method. And this isn't just transactionally efficient, it's also the way people want to engage in this service. People want that information, they want it on demand and when they need it. And this tool has really enabled us to do that and put the power in the consumer's hands. I'll mention real quickly that Topia, again, not intended to be an advertisement or commercial for us, but really one of the several areas that we offer in terms of innovation are really focusing on the deployment of data analytics in our products and processes. And this is allowing customers to really transcend reporting to better analyze mobility, their programs, and get to predictive analytics and modeling. So, of course, it's always fun to see the ways that our customer success managers really find to present this kind of transformational information to customers. Really enjoy that part of being here. So these examples that I went through very quickly really talk about data analytics, digitization, crowdsourcing, digital communities, and artificial intelligence, as well as machine learning, all of the big buzzwords. But one word of caution that I would offer for our group is just beware of the shiny penny syndrome. And so shiny penny syndrome, if you look at Urban Dictionary, is really when you drop your current boy or girlfriend for a new hotter boy or girlfriend, a new shiny penny. So shiny penny syndrome in tech is when we get a little distracted from business goals by some really appealing or cool technology that doesn't exactly help us. So I just offer beware of the shiny penny. All of these buzzwords, machine learning, big data, blockchain, and so forth, can be tossed around quite frequently without a real connection to reality and to the business impact. So with Sean's forgiveness, I'll pause just to tell a quick dad joke related to this. And I remember a couple of other really hot phrases, and one of them was groundbreaking technology. And I would offer to our group, just remember, when the shovel was invented, it was a groundbreaking piece of technology. So my point really in the last section, beyond just the comic relief of our joke, was that the examples that I illustrated have real benefits for the business. Transparency, cost savings, better information, better data, better engagement, new solutions, faster solutions. All of these service providers have another benefit that I alluded to earlier, and that's all of them have figured out how to commercialize the benefits of their tech by bringing the benefits back into the transaction. Remember that we still purchase tech in our industry like it's 1999, and we probably wouldn't hear about these companies if they hadn't figured out how to bring these benefits back to a transactional benefit that can be passed along to the business. So when EdXpat is able to deliver its assessment or cultural solutions, at least in part online, it lowers the cost of that transaction, and therefore it's an easy sell into our organizations. But if their digital community also helps a spouse find a new job in the new location, making the family more financially sound and happier with their new location, we know intuitively that this is a good thing. It enhances the employee experience, aids in deployment, and reduces turnover. But it's much more challenging to quantify what that means for us as an organization. My point here is that we in HR need to take the positive step of actually quantifying these benefits, building and demonstrating the business case for these other types of benefits. And it's the only way to break free of 1999. On a side note, I find that any service provider really worth its salt can assist in building the business case for these types of benefits. So some of the benefits I encourage you to look for are here on the slide, but let me quickly just touch on two. Does the technology enhance the employee experience and how employees engage with service or need or their need? Does it help to redefine the engagement? When an employee reviews and books their services through our platform, it's not just the efficiency that defines this benefit, but it's the experience, it makes the experience a better one. And how do we quantify this? We can also ask, does the technology actually help attract people to the opportunity? Does it draw attention to the overall benefit of a job, location, or a company? If we provide enhanced decision-making tools, when PricePoint, DwellWorks, or Teleport puts tools in the employee's hands around understanding cost or choice, or how a location aligns with their values or goals, the benefits of this go way beyond just the transactional benefits. So one of the most important aspects of acquiring any technology is really defining your organizational goals. And because mobility is in some ways such a niche segment, really only you as a mobility manager can help define for your organization those priorities. Its development, what stage of development, as well as its current and future challenges. Only you have this ability, and it's really the most critical step in this whole process. From my consulting work in this area, I can absolutely guarantee that it's at this stage that more things get off track than at any other stage in the process. And let me just give you one example. I once worked with a new global mobility manager at a Chinese-owned company, and she really wanted to help create a program, or she wanted my help creating a program that would be a positive contribution to the company's compensation strategies and innovation for the mobility program. So she was looking for some strategies, some assistance putting into place a supply chain and some technology tools that could help her execute on this plan. Unfortunately, she really misread the maturity of the company in terms of its overall talent management capabilities and talent mobility objectives. And it was important, in my view, for this company to walk, not run first. And not only did the project not go anywhere, but after a few short months, she actually did. She exited the organization on to find one that was looking for the kind of objectives that she had in mind. So one of the factors to really carefully consider are the maturity of your mobility program. And by this, I don't just mean how new is the organization to mobility. What we're talking about is how integrated is the mobility program in the overall talent management strategy of the company. On one end of the spectrum are companies who treat mobility really as a logistical afterthought or a checkbox to internal and external recruitment. On the complete other end of the spectrum are organizations that treat mobility as an important driver of the talent process. And our decisions about what organizational needs are are really going to vary completely based on this level of maturity. Other things to consider really are volume, growth path, what your C-suite priorities are, and the state of your HRS and payroll systems. I hate sounding like Captain Obvious from those Expedia TV commercials, but solutions that assist with efficiency and scalability are not really going to resonate with an organization that has very low volume programs or those not expected to grow anytime soon. So let's take a quick look at some examples of how some companies are demonstrating their benefits. I'm going to touch on just at a high level some of the elements of effective selection and management of technology as well. And I'll try to relate to these to mobility, but the fact is these things are really related to the management of any technology. And so let's start by asking a basic question about the core requirements for any platform. First, let's touch on compliance. And any technology being marketed, sold today, compliance is really a core part of the offering. Nevertheless, this is an area that you really make assumptions about at your peril. Understand your own organization standards and the process for establishing compliance. And one of the basic screens in technology selection and building a business case is, does the company have a track record of going through the necessary compliance steps? Does the supplier work with similar organizations to your own? For example, here at Topia and previously in my career, I've worked with global financial institutions and global pharma companies. These have some of the most stringent requirements anywhere for compliance. So asking this question up front is an important starting point for knowing if you have the right potential partner. So another key item to explore for any platform is, does the technology integrate with your HRS and payroll systems? And how do you know that? How have they demonstrated this in the past? It's a very important question to explore. Any platform must be able to perform kind of comprehensive data management. But let's talk about analytics quickly. Looking at platform and analytics, you want to consider, is this predictive? Is it visual? And most importantly, is it really easily accessible? And I say that because I've seen systems and platforms where one component of those three things is missing, and it makes it very difficult to get to that predictive or storytelling type of analytics that's so important. I would say keep in mind that most tools bolt on the analytics using tools like Looker and other tools. So it's really important to explore how good that integration is between the platform and the provider of the analytic tools. And a lot of things look nice on a slide deck. I think we've all been there. But what about the hands-on direct experience? So other important criteria to consider are here on this slide, and some of these are pretty clear, but I'd like to elaborate on just 2 points, and the first is implementation. Several years ago, I was involved in a platform implementation for a mobility product, and the company had selected the product based upon the overall capability of the platform to integrate and with their other tools, and also the ability to customize the product to support the company's operational processes. Unfortunately, they were several months into the implementation and they found themselves further and further behind towards seeing a completion date. And what we found was, indeed, the product was highly customizable in that the company was willing to customize it, but each item of customization led to further delays and further costs. And after our evaluation of the product, the company decided to walk away from the initiative completely. It was just too costly and the ROI wasn't there. So it's really important to completely understand the customer journey and practicalities for implementation. Another factor to consider that I'll touch on is how the system adapts and evolves. And one of the companies I work with had a great system in place for managing workflow, and it did a great job, really exactly as they needed at the time it was implemented. Unfortunately, and inevitably, things do change, and it became clear that the tech company had offshored and outsourced most of its engineering functions. And this came to mean really excruciating delays and lots of challenges to update the system. And fortunately, this story had a happier ending than my last one, in that the service provider ended up bringing its engineering back in-house, and they were able to get through these issues. But it is something that, as you're evaluating tech, needs to be completely understood. So each of these areas on this slide carries with it implications that need to be considered prior to selecting a provider. And some of these are pretty self-evident. Almost all solutions today are at this point are cloud-based, so we won't really cover all of these items, but let's highlight a couple of the following. First, what is end-to-end versus a point solution? The first serves as a platform versus delivering a single specific solution that solves a specific problem. What's multi-tenant versus single tenant? Most SaaS platforms today are multi-tenant, meaning there are multiple customers on the same version of a piece of software. And this really greatly simplifies the whole process of updating and keeping up to date with the software. In an outsourced versus a in-house development, and likewise proprietary versus dependent on third party. Just recall the story I told earlier. In general, outsourced development can mean that you are hostage to a downstream supplier. And think about it this way: you may be a significant customer for your provider, but are they significant for the end developer? That's not always the case. So, however, single tenant may mean that the company is better able to execute on very specific customizations that you want, specific to your engagement. So, as we come to the end of our presentation, there's still a lot to explore on the topic, and I could spend an hour just on this slide, but don't worry, I'm not going to. I'd like to touch on just two final points. I've been fortunate to participate in numerous acquisition products for tech and services in general, going back to my days managing the global supply chain for Prudential Relocation. In the success of this process, I think one of the most critical things is to make sure your business case aligns with the selection criteria. And we talked a little about that earlier. Why put selection criteria into a selection, or why put selection criteria into this process if it's not central to the success or failure of the initiative? So avoid kind of extraneous items that aren't core to your business case. And remember that the selection criteria really naturally evolves into contracting standards, service metrics, KPIs, and all the management tools that you're going to use to effectively manage the software. So it's definitely worth the investment in time to get the business case right up front, and the rest is going to flow through naturally. One very strong recommendation as well is divide the selection criteria into basic yes or no, or no go or no go criteria. And this allows you to very quickly, effectively determine in simple, easy to evaluate standards, allow you to screen out options that just will not work for you. So you can focus your time and your energy on those areas where qualitative differences between providers can make a difference between a product that's okay versus one that's great. I've been part of selection processes that had so many qualitative or narrative types of questions, for example, where the criteria that are actually evaluating the best fit became completely unworkable, and it devolved into a very subjective kind of process. So I'm happy to explain further about how to go about this if anyone would like to follow up with me directly. There's a lot of good process around establishing go, no-go criteria and building a compliance model and evaluating risk. Any of the other areas on this slide, I'd be happy to share. But I hope the discussion this morning has been helpful in at least framing a good conversation and giving you all food for thought when planning for mobility tech adoption. As promised, I've covered some of the context of mobility tech landscape and some elements of the planning process and a few of the specific tools around this. I've been forced to keep it short, But I just ask that we continue the conversation. If there are things you're looking for, please let us know. And also, I very much appreciate your feedback, especially constructive feedback. And Sean, with that, I'll turn this back over to you for any questions.
Great. Thanks, Michael, for taking us through that presentation this morning. I want to remind everyone now is the chance to ask any questions that you might have. We did have two questions come in, but if you have any, feel free to do so. You can also email Michael at michael.ray@topia.com, and he'd be happy to chat with you further on this topic. So, Michael, the first question we had that came in was, when would a point solution be preferred to an end-to-end solution and vice versa?
Yeah, and we touched on this earlier, Sean, but in general, a point solution refers to a piece of technology that solves a very specific business need, a very specific business challenge. And so generally it fits into the landscape of a more of a platform solution. We want those to integrate into what is a more holistic platform or process.
Great, thanks. And then another good question is, how long should an implementation take?
Yeah, that's an awesome question. And unfortunately, it doesn't have a really easy answer in that it really is going to vary. But a couple of points is I mentioned, comprehending the implementation is critical. But also thinking about the implementation in terms of generating stakeholder value early in the process is also important. And again, we could talk at length about this, but I think that it's important to have milestones set up along the way that are actually, especially in a lengthy platform type of implementation, it takes several weeks or months to completion, have some milestones along the way that stakeholders can look to realize, okay, we're making progress, we've got some value being generated along the journey. So happy to have a further conversation about this at any time.
Great, thanks, Michael. With that, we're going to go ahead and wrap up our webinar. I want to thank everyone for joining us today. Again, you can feel free to email Michael at any time if you have any questions. And we look forward to seeing you at our next webinar. Thanks, and have a great day.
Thank you.